Imagine you are handed a behavior plan that says, um, make the client less angry and stop them from daydreaming.
Yeah.
Like, how exactly are you supposed to measure angry? And how do you put a stopwatch on a daydream?
Well, you can't. I mean, the moment you try, your clinical data is entirely compromised. You're no longer practicing science. You're really just guessing based on your own mood that day.
Exactly right. So, welcome to the deep dive. If you're driving to the clinic right now, or maybe you're pacing around your living room studying, today's mission is highly specific and honestly, absolutely critical.
It is. It's foundational.
Yeah. We're conquering BACB 6th edition task list item H.1. So, developing intervention goals in observable and measurable terms. And to do this, we're pulling from a pretty elite stack of sources. We've got the BAS mock exams, the Cooper text, the ethics code for behavior analysts, and the 6th edition study guide.
Which is exactly what you need to break down the logic. We aren't just trying to pass the exam here. We want to execute at the top 1% of clinical practice.
Right, because without this, everything falls apart.
Okay, let's unpack this. We all hear in grad school that we need, good goals. But what actually separates a clinically precise goal from just a nice idea written on a clipboard?
That is the core question. I mean, the Cooper text says definitions of target behaviors must be 3 specific things. They have to be objective, clear, and complete.
Okay, so objective means just the observable facts, right?
Yeah.
And then clear means anyone can understand it. And complete means it covers the whole behavior.
You're in the right ballpark, yeah. But let's really sharpen that up for actual clinical practice. Because if you miss the nuance of even one of those elements, you don't have an operational definition.
We just have an opinion.
Exactly, you just have a subjective opinion. Let's use an analogy. Clear is like telling a new technician to, go out to the parking lot and look for a red car.
Right. Pretty easy to understand.
But complete is giving them the exact make, the model, the license plate number, and specifically telling them not to accidentally log the maroon truck parked right next to it. Oh, wow. Okay, so complete establishes those really strict boundaries.
Yes, it tells the observer exactly what is included as an instance of the behavior and just as importantly, what is excluded. It tells you exactly when the behavior begins and exactly when it ends.
That makes a ton of sense. So clear is being able to read it and paraphrase it, but complete is giving it that definitive fence. But what about objective? That means no judgments, no assumptions about what the client is feeling in the head.
Right, and that brings us straight to radical behaviorism. We only measure what interacts with the physical environment.
So we just strip away all the emotional labels.
Completely. We have to completely strip away judgmental descriptions. Words like bad or mean or aggressive or even frustrated have absolutely no place in a clinical definition.
Because you can't measure frustrated.
Exactly. Instead, we must quantify the actual dimensions of the behavior. We measure topography, which is what the behavior looks like.
Right.
We measure intensity, which is the force of the behavior. We measure frequency, how often it happens, and duration, how long it lasts.
Hold on. Let's clarify radical behaviorism for a second, because that sounds pretty intense to someone outside the field.
Yeah.
You just mean we only deal with things we can definitively prove happened in the physical space, right?
Yeah.
Like rather than guessing about internal thoughts or moods.
Yeah, it does sound intense, but it's really just a commitment to scientific reality. Radical behaviorism acknowledges that private events exist. Things like thoughts and feelings are real.
We just can't track them on a graph reliably.
Right. It dictates that we cannot use them as the primary explanation for why a behavior occurs, simply because we cannot reliably observe or measure them.
So if we can't observe it, we can't agree on it.
And if we can't agree on it, we can't treat it. It's really that simple.
Okay, so how do we take these textbook definitions and apply them to the real world so that any clinician can actually visualize them? Because, writing the client is frustrated is super easy, but it totally violates that rule of being objective.
Let's look at an incredible specific detail from the study guide. Instead of writing the client is frustrated, an elite operational definition looks more like this. Slamming a closed right-hand fist, oriented with the thumb up, striking a desk with enough force to be audible to a listener 10 feet away.
That is amazing. Wait, audible to a listener 10 feet away.
Yeah.
That completely solves the issue of measuring intensity.
It really does. You don't have to guess if it was a hard slam or a soft slam.
Right, because if you can hear it from 10 feet away, it counts. And if you can't, it doesn't.
Exactly. Think about the clinical power of that level of precision. Closed right-hand fist, thumb up. There is zero ambiguity there.
So if an RBT walks into that chaotic clinic room on their very first day, They know exactly what to track.
They don't have to guess what frustrated means for this specific client versus another client. It's universally understood.
Okay, let's look at another applied ABA scenario, and this one is straight from the mock exams. We have a client named Xavier. He's a 10-year-old with ADHD, and the primary issue is that he interrupts the class. Now, a weak subjective goal would look something like, Xavier will exhibit improvement in adhering to disruption policies.
Right. And look at how utterly useless that goal is from a measurement standpoint. I mean, what does exhibit improvement even mean?
Is that 1 less interruption, 10 less?
Who knows? And what exactly does adhering to policies look like? You cannot put adhering on a graph.
Yeah, it's really just corporate jargon applied to a child. But here is the correct goal from the exam logic. Xavier will decrease his frequency of class interruptions to a maximum of 3 instances during a school day for 3 consecutive days.
What's fascinating here is the architecture of that sentence. It specifies the exact target behavior, which is the frequency of class interruptions.
And it provides a quantifiable target.
Yes, a maximum of 3 instances. And it establishes a strict boundary and time frame during a school day for 3 consecutive days.
Which is how you prove mastery.
Exactly. That is a goal you can actually measure and graph with absolute certainty.
And matching the measurement to the goal is just as critical as defining the topography, right?
Yeah.
There's a great example in the mock exams about a client named Dylan who picks his nose. The school is worried he's being excluded by peers, so the goal is a behavior reduction program. Now, as a 10-year-old boy, that's practically a full-time job, but we need to get a solid baseline.
The central question there is, what behavioral dimension should you actually collect baseline data on? Do you use percent of occurrence, inter-response time, rate?
Well, the sources point to rate. You operationally define the nose picking, and then you take data in 1 to 5 minute chunks to get an average number of picks per minute. But let me ask you, why rate instead of percent of occurrence? Percent of occurrence seems, I don't know, really common in clinics.
It is common, but percent of occurrence implies you're giving the client discrete opportunities to engage in the behavior, like trials.
Oh, I see. Like if you ask a client to identify a color 10 times and they get it right 8 times, that's 80%.
Exactly. That makes sense for a discrete trial. But nose picking is a free operant behavior.
Meaning it can just happen at any time, totally on its own.
Yes. Free operant behaviors flow freely without needing a specific prompt from a teacher or technician. Rate works because it measures that free-flowing behavior against a continuous clock.
So a report saying someone picks their nose 16% of the time isn't clinically useful.
No, because the time isn't a standardized opportunity. Knowing the exact rate of occurrence, say 2.5 times per minute, gives you a precise baseline to measure your intervention against. The measurement dimension has to perfectly align with the operational definition and the ultimate clinical goal.
Right, okay. So we figured out what the behavior looks like, and we know how to match the measurement system to it. But when you're looking at exam questions or even writing your own behavior plans, there are a few massive pitfalls. I see this all the time. People try to measure why someone did something.
Yes, that is a huge trap.
Let's look at this mock exam question about a client named Tiffany. One of the goal options states, Tiffany will not throw objects with the intent to hurt someone. Now wait, let me push back here. As a human being, stopping her from throwing objects to hurt people sounds way more important and much safer than the other option on that test, which is simply throwing objects smaller than her hand. Why is the safer sounding goal wrong? I mean, I want to stop her from hurting people.
It is a completely natural instinct to want to address the danger and the motivation behind it, but this goes right back to radical behaviorism. Intent is a private event.
Oh, right.
You cannot reliably observe or measure intent. If Tiffany throws a block and it hits a peer, how do you objectively, scientifically prove she intended to hurt them versus just carelessly throwing at the wall and having it bounce off and hit someone?
I can't. I mean, unless she explicitly tells me, I can't look inside her head. And even if she tells me, she might not be accurately reporting her own private events.
You're hitting the nail on the head. You cannot measure intent across multiple observers reliably. You can, however, easily observe and measure the size of an object being thrown.
So throwing objects smaller than her hand is deeply objective.
Yes, it sets a physical, observable boundary. It might sound less emotionally resonant to a layperson, but it is the only goal you can actually measure accurately and consistently.
That is wild to think about.
When you focus on the observable topography, you are actually creating a safer environment because you can effectively intervene on the specific mechanics of the dangerous behavior.
That makes total sense. We have to strip away our assumptions about their motivation when we are writing the definition. So intent is out.
Right.
Knowing exactly what the behavior looks like is in. But looking at another exam question, it seems like knowing what it looks like still isn't enough if you don't know the destination.
What do you mean?
Well, the goal here says, student will increase new sight words mastered daily during literacy training.
Ah, if we connect this to the bigger picture of clinical programming, that goal is fundamentally incomplete. It lacks a quantifiable dimension. Increase by how much?
Right. Increase is a direction, not a destination. You can learn one new sight word over an entire year and technically fulfill that goal.
Exactly. To meet the measurement requirement of a clinical goal, we need to know the exact numeric expectation. Without saying increase by 2 new sight words daily, you essentially have no criterion for success.
And if you don't have a criterion for success, you wouldn't know when to deliver the terminal reinforcement.
And you wouldn't know when the goal is actually met, so you can move on to the next target. It leaves the learner in a state of clinical limbo.
Okay, so if you're driving to the clinic right now listening to this, you might be thinking, sure, this makes perfect sense when we talk about it logically, but the BCBA exam questions are deliberately tricky. The test makers know how to make a subjective goal sound highly clinical.
Oh, they absolutely do.
So how do we decode that when we're sitting in the testing center? Here's where it gets really interesting. What's the strategy?
You need to understand Pearson VUE logic. This is an exam of absolute precision. If you see this, choose this. First, use the elimination rule.
Okay, so what are we eliminating?
If you are scanning goal options and you see words like wants, feels, understands, daydreams, or intent, eliminate them immediately. Do not second guess it. They are subjective private events.
So even if the rest of the sentence sounds perfectly formatted, like the client will understand the disruption policy for 3 consecutive days, it's completely wrong.
It is dead in the water. You cannot measure understanding. You measure the demonstration of a skill that suggests understanding.
That is a massive distinction. So what are we looking for?
The winning formula on the exam is to actively scan the options for 3 specific components. First, look for a specific topography, what the behavior physically looks like. Second, look for a temporal dimension, like duration, or a measure of repeatability, like frequency or rate. And third, it must be paired with a definitive boundary or time frame.
Like the Xavier example we talked about earlier. Maximum of 3 instances is the repeatability, and during a school day for 3 consecutive days is the definitive boundary.
Exactly. The exam will often try to trick you by providing a beautifully written topography, but leaving out the time frame. Or they will give you a strict time frame, but use a subjective word like anxious to describe the behavior.
So the correct answer must be objective, clear, and complete. All 3 every single time.
Every single time, no exceptions.
So what does this all mean for you when you close the textbook, pass the exam, and walk into a clinic on Monday morning? Writing a subjective goal is like giving your staff a recipe that just says, bake until it looks done. Writing an operational goal is saying, bake at 350 degrees for exactly 20 minutes. One guarantees a massive, unpredictable mess in the kitchen. The other guarantees procedural integrity.
That baking analogy perfectly captures the mechanism of procedural integrity. And if we connect that to the broader clinical picture, it directly impacts task list item H.6.
Making database decisions about procedural integrity.
Yes, and it is the absolute bedrock of inter-observer agreement, or IOA.
Let's really dig into IOA for a second, because if 2 RBTs are watching the same client at the same time, they need to record the exact same data, otherwise the data is essentially worthless, right?
Correct. Inter-observer agreement is the extent to which 2 independent observers report the same observed values after measuring the same events. The target for IOA is typically 80% agreement or higher. But think about this practically. If your definition is vague, if you just tell your staff to track aggression, Observer A might count a loud shout as aggression, while Observer B only counts physical hitting.
Their IOA would be terrible. I mean, they are watching the exact same child in the exact same room and coming up with wildly different numbers.
It would plummet. And if staff cannot agree on whether a behavior occurred because your clinical definition is vague, the data becomes entirely biased.
And if the data is useless, your entire intervention is compromised. You can't make database decisions on bad data. You end up changing interventions that might actually be working or keeping interventions that are failing simply because the observers are confused by the definition.
It goes even deeper than just bad data. It directly touches on the ethics of informed consent. Specifically, Code 2.01 providing effective treatment and Code 2.16 describing behavior change interventions before implementation.
Because you have to explain what you are doing to the client and their family before you just start changing their environment.
Exactly. You cannot ethically obtain informed consent if the stakeholders do not objectively understand exactly what behavior you are targeting. Consider a parent meeting where you say, "We are going to put your child's tantrums on extinction."
Right. The parent might think a tantrum is just whining or crying, and they agree to the plan.
But if your clinical definition of the tantrum actually includes throwing heavy furniture,
Mhm.
and you haven't clearly defined that for the parent, you have not adequately explained the risks or the parameters of the intervention.
Wow. Vague definitions literally break down informed consent. Because the parents are consenting to a vague word they understand colloquially, not the actual clinical reality of what you are targeting.
Exactly. A complete, observable, operational definition protects the client. It protects your technicians, and it protects the integrity of the science. It ensures that everyone, the BCBA, the RBT, the teacher, and the parents, are all looking at the exact same target behavior.
And it doesn't stop in the clinic. You have to write goals that survive in the wild. There's a critical point in the sources about programming for maintenance and natural contingencies. If we define a behavior so rigidly that it only applies to a highly contrived clinic setting, we've totally failed the applied dimension of applied behavior analysis.
That is a crucial connection to make. The relevance of behavior rule dictates that we should only target behaviors that are likely to produce reinforcement in the person's natural environment after treatment ends.
So when you define your observable and measurable goal, you have to ask yourself, what does this look like at the client's home? What does this look like in the middle of a grocery store?
Exactly. If your operational definition of requesting a break requires the client to hand over a laminated token, that is measurable, yes. But is it functional in the real world?
Probably not. You don't
Yeah.
walk around with a laminated break card in your pocket when you're at the grocery store or at a family dinner.
So a better operational definition for the ultimate goal might involve the client independently stating, "I need a minute," in a conversational volume. That is still highly observable, it is still measurable, but it allows the client to access the natural contingencies of the real world. That is how you effectively program for maintenance.
It is all connected. The definition drives the measurement drives the data drives the intervention, and the intervention drives the real-world outcome.
If the foundation, the definition, is flawed, the entire clinical structure collapses. That is why task list item H.1 is not just an exam concept you memorize and forget. It is the daily operational reality of an elite behavior analyst.
This completely shifts the perspective for me. I think we often view objective clinical data as cold or robotic.
Yeah.
We worry that breaking human actions down into frequencies and topographies strips away the humanity of the person we are working with.
I hear that concern a lot.
But consider this. By stripping away judgmental labels like aggressive or bad or manipulative and replacing them with observable facts, operational definitions actually force us to remove our own personal biases.
That is a profound point. When we stop judging the intent or labeling the child as difficult, we can actually start observing the environment and helping the individual.
Exactly. In a way, extreme scientific objectivity is the ultimate tool for clinical empathy. It forces us to deal with the reality of the client's environment, rather than our emotional reaction to it.
Well said.
If this helped you, follow behavioral intelligence, share this episode with another RBT or BCBA who's studying, and leave a comment or review. That's how we grow and how I keep creating high-level content for you.
At Amethyst Therapy Services, Inc., we build clinicians, not just test passers. Visit us at www.amethysttherapyservices.com or reach out at info@amethysttherapyservices.com.